closer look at the political headlines. And joining us are ABC White House correspondent MaryAlice and contributing political correspondent Rachael Bade. Welcome to you both. Good morning. Okay, so MaryAlice, the DNC, the Democratic National Convention, starts on Monday. What does the party need to do? Because all eyes are on the DNC.
Yeah, absolutely. My sources close to the convention describe three big goals. They say they have a moment here to reintroduce Kamala Harris to the country, introduce, of course, Governor Walz. The other two goals are actually trickier. They want to talk about what the Biden-Harris administration has gotten done, but also show that Harris has a big vision of her own. And it's going to be tough for them to get that balance right. You know, I've talked to a lot of Democrats in Washington who feel really proud of what Biden has accomplished. They're pointing to the fact that he actually had a really huge win this week. I mean, Medicare for the very first time negotiated down to pretty big discounts, some of the costliest drugs for seniors on Medicare. But other Democrats who especially work out in the country and some of these battleground states say you cannot just focus on that. You have to meet people where they are. She has to look like she has her own big ideas. On top of that, I think it's going to be tough for Democrats to not look like the event is just all Hollywood, too star-studded. That's a real risk for them. They're going to have a ton of protesters in the streets around the war in Gaza. That's going to be tricky. And they have to face the elephant in the room, which is that Biden is not the nominee. That is going to be tough for them to talk about. They're going to have to talk about. I mean, there's a lot of voters that really still think that everything that happened was just too weird, too crazy, too head-spinning. They got to address it head on.
Such a big week ahead, so much to keep a close eye on. And Rachel, we have seen, Kamala Harris starting to give us a glimpse at what's going to be in her agenda. What might we see in terms of policy at the convention? And what do you think we should be looking for in terms of her first 100 days, what that would look like if elected?
Yeah, she's certainly starting to put some meat on the bone when it comes to policy after spending the past few weeks basically leaning into this vibe that's really given her momentum. I mean, this week with her economic rollout, just a few things she talked about: boosting the child tax credit up to $6,000 for folks who have newborns, first federal ban on corporate price gouging, and $25,000 for first-time home buyers, which is obviously a huge deal because a lot of folks these days actually can't afford to buy a home. But beyond that, we actually haven't seen a lot of policy details right now. I mean, we've covered, Mary, you covered Congress before. Usually by this time in a presidential race, we can tell you exactly what they're going to be working on the first few weeks of Congress. We don't actually know. And the reason is there's actually a divide behind the scenes right now. I've talked to Democrats who think, okay, why talk policy right now when we could just continue to ride this positive wave of momentum? It's really working for her right now. If you look at the polls, you put out specifics, all of a sudden the left is saying that's not good enough. The right is saying, or the centrist Democrats say, that's too far to the left. And as one Democrat told me, values unite, specifics divide. And lastly, I would say, there's a fear that if she is too specific on policy, that Donald Trump will sort of use that to attack her. And right now, he just is flailing. He doesn't know what to do. So.
The Harris campaign has, though, unveiled some economic policy proposals. MaryAlice, what has the response been to Vice President Harris's economic plan?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Rachel's exactly right. 5-point plans rarely win elections. But I think they can help in this case if it makes her look a little more serious compared to Donald Trump. I mean, Rachel's exactly right, too, in that we've seen such little policy at this point that the fact that she put anything to paper, I think that, she'll get some points for. Progressives that I talked to say that she does get really high marks for talking about food and housing. It was interesting, like you said, she's talking about how she wants to go after big chains, big corporations that she thinks have engaged in price gouging. Republicans say that's the wrong place to place blame. But, we'll see if voters buy into that tact when it comes to high food prices. Housing is interesting because so much is decided at the local level. Zoning decisions are decided at the local level. Everyone across the board knows it's a crisis, but it's actually really hard for the federal government to work on. I think that she gets big points for talking about this when so many Americans are talking about it and struggling with it. But big picture, I think that the point is well made, that policy specifics can divide the party. It gives Republicans fodder. I think that's exactly right. But on the other side, Trump has basically said he's going to direct his cabinet to lower prices somehow. I think there's a lot of voters that also don't take that seriously.
And Rachel, we have just a few seconds, but what about the Republican side? Because obviously they have a policy push there. What's working?
At this point, I think Republicans would be happy if Donald Trump talks at all about policy at this point. We've heard the phrase reset, reboot 4 weeks now. He just isn't doing it. He's sort of leaning into this idea of personal attacks against Harris, saying he has a right to do it. And, I've caught up with a number of Trump insiders this week who were really pushing back on this notion they were hearing from other Republicans that he needs to even talk policy at all. They said, let the guy be himself. It worked in 2016. By the way, it didn't work in 2020. But they're saying even negative press at this point is good press because they're fighting for relevancy that hard that they're afraid that if they talk about wonky things, policy things, which, by the way, affect everyday Americans and are important, that they're just going to basically be glossed over, and Harris will continue to run away with this.
All right, Rachael Bade, MaryAlice Parks, thank you both for being here, making us smarter every day.